Of course, I was devastated, but put my full attention to Serena because I saw how distraught she was. I felt lost because, I want to be there for her. I want to do everything I can. I want to try and take the pain away, but I couldn't. Sometimes your partner just wants to know that you understand too.
Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
On this week's episode, we wanted to do a bit of a change. And I say this because last week we spoke to Serena from Himmat Collective about the journey she's having in regards to fertility. But one thing that we always struggle with is, well, as women, is we don't realize the impact it then has on our husbands or partners. So today we've got Vic here with us, who is Serena's husband. And we want to carry on that conversation of how he's feeling and, what's next and what's going on in regards to the fertility journey for him. So firstly, hiya Vic, how are you?
Good evening, guys. I'm very well. How are you guys?
Yeah, doing well. We've had a bit of an insight. So we're really glad that you have joined us this evening because I don't know if Serena sort of forced you to do this, but it was fab when she said, yeah, Vic will join the podcast as well. So we're like, yes, great.
He's tied in.
So in regards to yourself, could you tell us a bit about yourself, please, Vic?
Yeah, so my name's Vic Singh. I'm 30 years old. I'm self-employed. And me and Serena are looking to move on to the next stage of our lives, which is to obviously have a child. But with that has come its complications. But obviously we'll discuss that a bit further. But a little bit about me is I'm a very, very simple person. Don't know if you might have noticed, I'm a Derby County fan, huge. That's probably my center part of my life, that is. So
Okay, I was going to say, so you're from Derby, because I actually thought maybe he's from Birmingham. I was going to ask that question at some point.
I was going to say, my accents aren't good, is it? So I always get them wrong.
This is the funny thing. So, I'm born in Derby, but I've lived in Birmingham most of my life, so I've got the Birmingham accent, unfortunately.
Oh, so we were right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought we were thrown off then.
Anybody asks, I do say I'm from Derby, though.
Why is it embarrassing? No, actually, let's not go down that conversation because that will be a whole other podcast, I think. And we've got a close family in Birmingham, so we don't want to do that. Okay. In regards to, so how long have you and Serena been married, Vic?
We are into our 2023 now, so this will be our 6th year. 6th year marriage, but we've been together about 8 years.
Okay. And it's interesting when you were talking about, when you introduced yourself, you said, we wanted to move our lives to the next stage.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously looking at South Asian community and culture, we sort of do see our lives in stages, right?
Yeah.
So in regards to, looking to have a family, what sort of got you to that stage? So you were obviously married, and is it from day one? It's like, okay, now it's a family, or how? What are you talking about when you say next stage? Where were you in your lives, and what changed at that point before you started thinking that?
So obviously, when we got married, we'd always wanted to travel. So we spent the first probably 2 to 3 years of our marriage just traveling, going to different places, going on holiday, just seeing the world because it was something that we both aspired to do. Then eventually, once we'd seen all the countries and ticked off all the continents that we wanted to visit, we discussed having a child. We felt like we was at the right age at that time, so we got married at 24, so it was quite early for us. So we were about 27, 28, which I'd say is probably around about the right age to maybe start thinking about having kids or having kids itself. So we had the discussion, and then eventually we started trying, but we had no success for about 10, 11 months, I believe, before she did fall pregnant. Obviously, when she fell pregnant, it was like everything was happy, everything was joyous. And then unfortunately,
just before you go on to the next part of what happened, just from the male's perspective, and this is why we're really interested in the fact that you're sitting in the hot seat today, do men talk about having families with their friends or family? Or I know this is very much a generalized thing because we don't all do the same thing, but how did you approach it in regards to your family and your friends?
I approached it with that roadmap sort of mindset. So I already said to myself, I get married at this age. do my traveling, and then I wanted to have kids at a certain age, which would have been about the 27, 28. So I was quite open in that sense. But if we talk in general terms, it's not very macho man to sort of talk about it, is it? Because we sort of, I think men tend to mask the way they actually feel, and that's why they avoid talking about certain things. So generally speaking, I don't think males talk about it enough, because I know obviously a couple of my friends now are dads, um, but that discussion was never had beforehand.
Can I just ask you about the roadmap thing?
Hmm.
Quite a lot of us do it in the South Asian community. Where do you think it stems from? Why do we do this? And why do we put this pressure on ourselves? Because we do almost tick boxes. Right, I've done this stage of my life, this stage, right now the child stage. Hopefully, I'm looking at the retirement stage very soon. But yeah, why do we do this?
I don't know if it's a generational thing. I think maybe because the older generation sort of had, well, you could argue they had a roadmap, but they didn't. Obviously, with the way the South Asians are in this country, is they've had to come over, leave everything behind, and start fresh. Maybe we put that pressure on ourselves to sort of thank them for all the stuff that they've done prior to that, and maybe that's why we have this roadmap of get married at this age, have kids by this age, job, car, whatever, house. Um, I think maybe that's probably why. I think it's more of a generational thing, but I think as the generations go on, you tend to see. I'm seeing it personally because I'm the oldest in my family. My cousins are getting married a lot later than I did, um, which then means that obviously the roadmaps are sort of changing, and maybe they don't think about it as much as we do. But I'm quite old school in that sense, so it's a bit of a weird balance.
Do you think when we do put those, okay, I'm going to do this at this time, and we don't achieve that goal almost, do you feel that we're putting pressure on ourselves? Because we're like, okay, it didn't happen. It should have happened at this time.
Yeah, I think unnecessarily, I think we do. And I don't know if that's just because, again, going back to the generational thing of there's an expectation there to sort of reach these goals and targets. But I mean, me personally, I took a different approach to that. I thought if it doesn't happen now, like not even just with kids, even in general, if it doesn't happen now, it's probably because there's a reason behind it, and it will happen eventually. So I always took a different approach. If we do generalize it, I think it's an unneeded pressure that we could probably get rid of. And I think as the generations go along, I think eventually they probably will eradicate that.
With the fact that you got married at 24 and you did wait a few years, now obviously looking at how things are moving and people are getting married later and so on and so forth, and not even getting married, um, did you, as a male again, get the pressure from your family of, oh, when are you going to have kids? Because you waited 3 years, you said. And from a woman, I know talking to all the guests that we've had and even between ourselves, that question gets asked to women quite a lot. Did you find that on your side of it?
No, I'm quite thankful with my parents. They're very sort of laid back and understanding. They've sort of let us just get on with life as it is. Never put any pressures on us at all to have children. Again, it just come to a decision that me and Serena made one day about deciding to have kids, and it felt like the right time then. So yeah, but my family have been very supportive throughout everything that we've been through, whether that's the pregnancies or the miscarriages. So I'm very thankful to have a really good support network around me.
We will talk about the family because Serena did mention it on her podcast, and I'll let you know what she says later. Let's leave it as a bit of a cliffhanger now. But, so we will go into that. Okay, so talk us through it. So it took about 11 months for Serena to get fall pregnant. How were you feeling between the time where you started thinking about it and then obviously it's taking its time? What was the thought process in your head?
Me personally, I felt like there was something wrong with myself. Maybe I thought that my sperm wasn't maybe as strong as it should have been, or maybe there's another issue, maybe whether it's a health issue or something like that. And I couldn't understand why it was taking so long. Just because again it was all quite alien to us because it was all very new, and I've never come across many people that actually talk about any struggles with sort of their fertility journeys or having kids. So as time went on, I used to think, oh God, there must be something wrong, and I actually did go to the NHS to get my semen tested because I was unsure about it at this point. I thought 11 months was quite long for nothing to happen. But
At what point did you go to check that then?
that would have been about the 7 month period. About 7 months in. Yeah. So and then literally the funniest thing was I got the appointment, and then a week before that we found out we were pregnant. So then I cancelled it, thinking that everything was fine. But yeah, like it
Sod's law happens every time,
And
doesn't it? It's such a pain.
and
honestly.
did you both go to get both of you got checked, or was it yourself that thought, okay, there's something quite not right. I'm gonna go and do it
Um,
first because someone's gonna go first.
I think I took it upon myself to get myself checked first because I always had a suspicion that maybe something wasn't quite right. But I think in terms of
Just
Serena,
because of the time scale, did you think that it wasn't right, or you just
yeah,
had?
yeah, yeah, 'cause I thought the time it took was quite long, and maybe I thought to myself maybe there might be other external factors. It could have been obviously because the job I do as well isn't very active, which can play a part. That was always in the back of my mind, but I never really brought it to the forefront until I had to. But I took it upon myself because I thought it's a bit long for us to just not have anything at all. We just keep firing blanks. I think Serena did start go through testing around about the same time I did, but obviously we haven't really gone in depth until after the miscarriages. So a lot more testing's been done since then.
I mean, quite a lot of people when they go to get themselves tested at that point, they feel really embarrassed,
Yeah, I mean,
and because we don't talk about it enough, and we make it almost like an embarrassing subject and
mhm.
not normalize things. How were you feeling at that point? What were the emotions like?
um, it's weird because I sort of had the feeling that something was wrong, so I was gearing myself up towards that. But there is that slight embarrassment of obviously the procedure in order to check your semen is a bit embarrassing in itself. I still find an issue with it now, like just because I don't feel comfortable doing it, but I know it has to be done. Um, but it's a weird one because I sort of prepared myself for it, knowing that if there is something wrong, I'd like to fix it as soon as possible. Um, but again, if we talk about in general terms, it can be quite embarrassing because you sort of put yourself down, especially as a male. You might think to yourself more, um, I'm not being what a man should be, in inverted commas.
In regards to the fact that you were feeling like this, how was Serena feeling from the conversations you were having at 11 months as well? Because we've heard from her side, what she was thinking from her part. But what were you thinking about her? I know that sounds like what is she saying, what is he saying? But what was the feeling that you were getting from her part?
I think she might have suspected that something was not quite right with either one of us or both of us. So we sort of had to explore that. I know it's a lot more rigorous for women when they get tested because they get tested for so many different things, whereas for men it's quite straightforward. It's just the one thing that you do tend to get tested on. Um,
Which is really interesting because if you're saying that, for men, it gets embarrassing, the process, da, 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 for a woman, we're expected. This is me being all politically high. I mean, go for the genders, all that sort of thing. But that's a thing. So why is it men find it so hard when it's so much more intrusive for women? I would have thought that are going through it.
again, I think it's probably because it's something out the norm, maybe for males as
Yeah.
opposed to females. Like obviously, I know females have smear tests and things like that. So that sort of practice, and I spoke to Serena about it. That sort of practice, it sort of comes as second nature to them. Whereas with us, if we're going to like, if a male's going to get their semen checked, we find it weird because one, we don't expect to be in that position. Again, maybe because it's just a societal thing where we think that a man should be this 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 sort of utopian picture when it's not. Um, but I think maybe it's that, and I think maybe because again, maybe there's not enough information out there about having semen analysis done and how it affects different cultures, different communities, and things like that. So it's a bit of a weird bag. I think it's a mixed bag. I feel, but again, I think as the generations go along, I think it'll get better.
So, what is a man meant to be in the eyes of the world? Because
So
we've mentioned that quite a bit. So, what do you think? Yeah, explain it to us.
And you've got a smile on your face, so you're like, this is one of those questions.
see, I don't take any pride in being like obviously of course I'm a male, but I'm not macho about it. Like I'm very in touch with my feelings, and I wear my heart on my sleeve sort of person. But generally speaking, for a male, you tend to think that they're meant to be like the superheroes, or they're meant to deal with everything and not talk about what they go through because it's shown as a sign of weakness. And they have to be the core strength and everything, and they have to take charge. and I feel personally it shouldn't be like that, and I don't think it will be going forward, because a lot more males are starting to open up about how they feel. I've always been like that, so I'm very heart on sleeve. I'm very upfront, and I'll if I have an issue, I'll tell people about it, or if I feel upset, I will let people know, because sometimes I think, and I go by the mantra of if you share your problem's automatically halved. Um,
Can I say what's really good about what you've just said is, the whole way that people perceive it, men have to be the core strength, blah blah, and it's like we're trying to make everyone's life easier. The interesting thing was when we were talking to Serena, the fact that you were communicating this actually made her life so much easier. So it's actually the opposite from what you've just said, or rather than that pretend image of I can take care of everything, you don't need to worry about anything. That's what helped her, is what I got from the when we spoke to her. I could be wrong. I mean, you're married to her, so you know her a lot better than I do. So one of those. But it's interesting that you say that. That's a really interesting point, I think.
What's made it? Why are you so okay with talking out about your feelings? Is it the people that you're around? Is it just because that's just your personality? What allows you to be so open?
there's a number of things. I think another thing I go by is if you want to see change in the world, sometimes you have to be the change. And in my case, I feel like if I talk about my feelings and talk about how everything I've been through, and literally to the T, talk about every single detail, if that helps one person out there, that's your jobs are sort of done. So I go by that sort of mantra, but it's uh, it's a bit of a hard one to answer that one, but
We like throwing the curveballs. Don't worry.
no,
We're only just started.
great question. It's a really great question, but so could you say it again for me? Because I just sort of sidetracked there a minute.
Oh, you could have been a politician. That would have been it. So basically, what makes you comfortable to talk about your emotions and your feelings? Because quite a lot of males don't. But how? Why do you feel so comfortable doing it?
Yeah, I think it goes back to when I said about being the change. Sometimes you have to be the face for that change. But I'm quite comfortable talking about it because I feel like if I can help somebody out there, even if it's a random person I don't know, a stranger, or if it's someone close to me, if anything I say or do helps them in a positive manner, then that's progression towards the bigger goal. So for me, that's what that's why I'm quite hard on sleeve and I just talk about my feelings because I feel like I said, a problem shared is a problem halved.
So, with your friends, are they similar as well? You think they share their journeys as well with you, or is it because you've started, they've started?
I think they do share their journeys. I think there's still barriers that need to be broken in terms of the male side of everything, but we do talk about our issues and stuff quite often now, more so than we did beforehand, which is a positive step. And it could be maybe because I'm quite open and honest and been doing a lot of work with Himmat Collective, that they maybe thought they can find comfort in that to talk about their issues if they've got any. So we are sharing a lot more now, but I think more can be done.
Okay, so we're at that 11-month mark, and you've just found out that Serena's pregnant. What happens next?
Well, you start planning for the birth, don't you? Immediately, oh, we're gonna get the baby clothes. They're gonna get these baby clothes. They're gonna get the rocker, this and that. So it was a very joyous time when we were going through it. We told obviously my mum and dad, obviously because we live with them. We told them, my sister as well, and then we let my grandparents and Serena's mum and dad know. So we kept it quite small to begin with, because obviously that was, you tell the immediate family, don't you, first, and then you carry on from there. But literally from that moment on, when we found out, I sort of went into like that, so like when you just sort of like wrap Serena in cotton wool, so
Yeah.
make sure nothing goes wrong, sort of thing. So we did that. So anything like housework, anything, I was doing it. If it was like
Oh God, you should. Oh my God, that sounds really good.
I was like, that doesn't happen every time, then,
I was
does
going to
it?
say that didn't happen to me.
this in my house, I do quite like the housework, to be fair.
Do you know what? Our husband probably say the same thing. Actually, we did that as well. No, sorry. Roti on everything. But
No,
anyway, sorry, carry on. We won't downplay it.
I'm not that advanced. I can't do it. But yeah, so like literally, so like we went into that mode of wrapping her in cotton wool. Any strenuous work we would do and share it between the family, make sure she got all the support she needed. And then obviously we got to 5 week. I think it was the 5 week scan Serena had, where she noticed a spot of bleeding and she was a bit concerned about it. So she went to the hospital. She saw the baby's heartbeat and everything was fine up until that point. So then we booked a reassurance scan, a private reassurance scan just after that, for about the 11th week mark, just because we thought, just to make sure everything's all right. This would have been my first opportunity to see our child and its heartbeat. And then obviously, if we fast forward to the 11 weeks, we went to the scan and we were the first ones in, so I was quite excited. I mean, I wore new clothes, everything, so I literally treating as if the child was here, sort of thing, because this would have been my first meeting with that child, so I wanted to make it as
That's
memorable as.
so sweet. That is, yeah.
I was going to say that's a first. I mean, I never even thought about getting new clothes and things like that for the first scan, so that's cute.
But
Okay,
Val, do you ever for
that's
anything?
fair enough. Okay, but anyway, we'll move on with that conversation.
Yeah, so like we were the first ones in, so we were quite positive, quite boisterous about it, because obviously Serena's in the heartbeat, so we'd gone by that. But the weird thing was, I think about 3 or 4 days before that, Serena just come up with this weird saying of, "I just don't feel pregnant."
Mm.
And I thought maybe it's just your hormones, or maybe you just don't feel well. Maybe you got an upset stomach or something, or it could be something else. Obviously, I didn't want to think about that at that point. And
Can I
obviously,
just add? Can I just add here because this is really interesting. This is something Tad just said. Just to let you know, obviously we've spoken about miscarriage as well, and this is something Tad just brought up in previous podcasts where it's like she felt the same thing when she
Yeah.
was going through it.
So I've had 2 miscarriages, and I just knew that it wasn't going to go full term, and that it wasn't going to happen. So there is some sort of women's intuition about
But do
obviously the body. Yeah.
but do men have that intuition as well? So obviously with that, did you feel okay, maybe just out of interest because obviously even the women's intuition is interesting to even think that they have that. But what about yourself as a man in the
as, as,
situation?
as a male, like I didn't really think about it like that, as I thought, no, let's try and keep as positive as possible. Just because you don't expect that sort of thing to happen, so you're trying to keep your wife positive, yourself positive. But I think going back to the female side of it, I think maybe it's a maternal instinct that maybe they feel that way, um,
Mm.
and obviously they might like you said. And I'm sorry to hear about your miscarriages as well. Um, but yeah, maybe it could be a maternal instinct. But from a male perspective, I honestly didn't think it was going to be the outcome that it was.
Is
So
that because like you were just trying to stay positive and thinking, okay, no, it's gonna be fine, it's gonna be fine. But
uh,
did you, at the back of your mind, think, okay, I know it isn't, but it is?
so like this is the weird thing now. So like initially I was like, yeah, it's probably just it could be something else. Obviously, you go on Google and you search things like, what does this mean? Sometimes they say it could be like it can be something that's not related to the pregnancy. So I went on that just based on the information I could find online. And then when we got to the scan, when we started the first part of the scan, which would have been on the stomach, um, I was watching the scan where Serena couldn't really see the screen as clear as I could. I had a feeling straight away something wasn't right because of just looking at the nurse's sort of reaction from her facial expressions and looking at the actual scan itself. I couldn't see anything, and I,
What do you mean? Sorry, on that point, what do you mean? What was the facial expressions of the nurse? Because
so,
that's why we asked you to turn the camera on for this podcast, actually, for the same
yeah,
reason, I'm assuming.
yeah. So like she was puzzled as to why she couldn't see anything. So obviously, when you see someone looking puzzled, you immediately think that this is going to take a turn for the worst.
Yeah.
Um, so that those were her sort of facial expressions. But then initially, as soon as that had happened, and we couldn't see anything on the scan, I was like, something doesn't feel right now. There must be something more to it now. And then obviously this is when they proceeded to do the internal scan.
Did you vocalize your feelings to Serena at that point?
No, no, I didn't.
Why did you choose not to do that? Might be a silly question, but it'd be good to, yeah, know the answer to that.
probably because it was new to me as well. So I was trying to digest the information rather than process how I felt at that time. Because I think maybe at that time, it probably wasn't the best place for me to talk about. Me to put that negative spin on. Oh, I can't see nothing. There's nothing there. I didn't want to panic because if I start panicking, she might panic as well. and that's the last thing you want in that sort of environment. But we did have that conversation maybe a couple of hours after we'd sort of processed that information of how we felt and that feeling that was there, that ended up being right in the end. Once they proceeded to the internal scan, they confirmed it pretty much. We got those dreaded words of, "I'm sorry, there is no heartbeat." So immediately you knew, and this is the positive inside of me trying to cling on to things. So after that had all happened, sometimes you read that the clinics, especially private clinics, might miss something. So there could be like a scan that probably they didn't do properly. So I clinged on to that hope, thinking that maybe they've just missed it, and we might have that slight chance that maybe the baby's still there. Because she still had the symptoms, which was the weird thing. It was she was still like she was at that stage where she was ready to like puke up but not be sick. She's having the cramps and stuff like that. So the symptoms were still as a normal pregnancy. So this is why we sort of clinged on to that even after what we'd found out.
So what did you do with that then? So you think that you do still have that hope? Did you go for another scan, or what did you do with the fact that you were still clinging on to that hope?
So the 12-week scan was a week later anyway. But we told the hospital that this is what had happened at the private scan, and they got us in pretty much immediately just to check everything through. And then obviously once they checked and they said the same thing, then you sort of just knew that you'd gone through a miscarriage. But obviously they explained to us it was a miscarriage, so I'd never heard of that beforehand. So I had no idea what a miscarriage was.
What is that?
So a missed miscarriage is you could still feel pregnant, but the child's heartbeat might have stopped at an earlier point. So in our case, just after the 5 week scan, maybe a few days afterwards, the baby's heartbeat would have stopped, but she still had the symptoms of being pregnant up until we went to the 11-week, 12-week scan.
So the 5 week scan, was that in the private hospital that you were having?
No, no, that was at the NHS. That was because
Okay.
Serena had found the spot of bleeding, so she was a bit
Oh,
concerned.
okay.
On your research, there's two things, and you may or may not be able to answer it, just out of interest. So the first question is, if it would have happened after the 5 weeks, what is it that causes her to carry on having those symptoms of still being pregnant? That's the first question.
It's a good question that I won't be able to answer.
That's fine. No, that's
It's
fine.
because the hormones are still there and they're not flushed out of the system. So
Yeah,
even when they do a pregnancy test afterwards, I don't want to put my hand, up in the air. It might not be 100% right, but the hormone, they're still not flushed out of the system. So
Okay.
is there a point of doing the pregnancy test
yeah.
Okay.
afterwards?
It was the HCG levels. I think that was still quite high after
See,
even
you
after.
do know what you're talking about, Vic. You're putting
No,
yourself down there with it.
no, literally just brought it back to when Benji mentioned the hormones. So it's
Yeah.
the HCG levels still come up quite high, so it makes you feel like you're still pregnant and gives you that possibility that you still could be. And hers even after the 11 weeks scan and everything, it was still quite high. Even after we found out about the miscarriage and obviously when she was given the pessaries and stuff, the ECG was still quite high. Um, so it was a bit of a weird one. It was a bit of a weird one.
So I'm just thinking, because in my case, so you had it in the 5 weeks because of the spotting. In my case, they didn't look at all, even when they were spotting. It was like, go home, here's a leaflet, let's see what happens. So it's different experiences for different people. So obviously, the hospital in your area, it sounds like it's really good and thorough.
The other question, and again, it might be a curveball, so this is out to both of you. Well, actually, this is a bit of a cultural question. Actually, a lot of the whole community. Sorry, these are the thoughts going on my head. You two are like, what's going on? What is she trying to get to? So, a lot of people say don't tell people before that 3 month scan. Now, obviously, that would have been prior to yours anyway, because you would have found out just before the 3 months. Am I correct in saying that the reason they say that is because there's always higher risk within those 3 months of it happening or not happening? Is that correct in saying that?
Yeah, yeah. So I think from research it shows that if you are gonna have if you are likely to have a miscarriage, it'll be in the first trimester, which is probably why they say not to tell anyone during the first 3 months.
Okay. Okay, so you found out. How are you feeling when they did say the dreaded words from the NHS scan because you still had that hope? What was going through your head?
Um, I mean, of course, I was devastated, but I sort of just put my full attention to Serena because I saw how distraught she was, and I knew that the physical sort of trauma that was about to come was going to be a lot more harder for her than it is going to be for me. So I sort of went into that sort of protection mode and just tried to be there for her, be as supportive as I can, and just do anything I could to try and ease any of her pain.
What happened next in your journey?
So after that, obviously, because of the miscarriage, there's quite a few complications with that. So in terms of trying to flush everything out the system, she was given numerous pessaries, but this was during COVID lockdown as well. So I wasn't allowed to be in the hospital at this point. So Serena had to do
Mm.
this pretty much on her own.
How did that make you feel? Because that is a big thing, isn't it?
It made me feel helpless, like I couldn't do anything. Like I just felt like I felt lost because like I want to be there for her. I want to do everything I can. I want to try and take the pain away, but I couldn't because of the restrictions that were in place. But again, the only way around it was like through FaceTime. So our saving grace at that point was FaceTime. Um, but yeah, that one was quite tough because she had to face that alone. There was a lot of complications. Even 2 months after all that had gone on, the levels were still quite high. We weren't sure why, even though the miscarriage had happened and the what would have been the sac and the fetus had left the body. Um, there was still quite a few more complications after that. So it was a bit hard trying to come around that because they normally say when they chuck all your eggs in one basket, that's what's happened to us with our first miscarriage. So we had all the complications you could probably think of and more. And then we took a slight break and then for about a month or two. And then we tried again because we thought, well, as far as we're aware, my sperm was fine, her eggs would be fine as well, and the follicles would be fine. So we can get pregnant. It's just a case of when. So we tried again. We fell pregnant instantly. So within that first month of trying, she was pregnant. But 3 days after finding out she was pregnant, she miscarried again. And that one was a bit more straightforward in inverted commas. So that was what you'd class as a normal sort of miscarriage. But there's a lot of heavy bleeding in this one. And with Serena's platelets being quite low, there's the worry that this could go take a turn for the worst. So we monitored her blood and everything like that. And then the best thing about this time was I was allowed to be in the hospital, so I got to see everything start to finish.
Okay, so this was something Serena mentioned as well, and this one she in a strange way from the episode we had with her, she said that it was easier with the fact that you were there.
Yeah, I think
How did you feel? Because previously you felt helpless. What were the feelings? Because now you're seeing it in front of you as to what Serena is going through. What's going through your mind?
um, I just tried to take everything in as much as I could because again I'd heard of miscarriage but I'd never seen it. So all of this would have been new to me. So it made me understand the process a lot more thorough, and it just allowed me to sort of be the support that I couldn't do through the first miscarriage and the second one. And I thought if we you say strength is in your unity, isn't it? So if you focus on each other, keep each other positive, you can get through it. So I thought if I could keep that with her, she'd get through this. And then obviously the miscarriage happened, but it was nice just to sort of grieve together rather than separate because I felt like with the first one, because we had sort of different paths in the way we grieved and the way the whole processes went, we sort of lost our way a little bit as a couple. But the second time it was a lot better because we could grieve together. We understood each other's feelings a lot more. We were in touch with our feelings a bit more, and it was easier to bounce back off each other then. So we could be each other's strength in that period.
What was the grieving process? Was it just communicating with each other? What was the process for you, the grieving, basically?
I think with the grieving process, especially when you go through miscarriages, there's a lot of unanswered questions. So you sort of question yourself as why did this happen? How did this happen? And then it becomes an individual thing of is it because of me? In Serena's case, she would have thought, is it because my body couldn't carry the baby? In my case, I thought maybe my sperm wasn't strong enough. Um,
And that leads me on to the question that we touched on earlier, because that, as a woman, and I'm sure you've had this conversation with Serena, is my body's not doing what it's supposed to do. And the interesting thing, earlier on, you said exactly the same thing, didn't you? So where do you think this whole, why do we ask ourselves this question? And this is very much delving into it. So just from your perspective, because that is a tough question, what is it that's causing us to blame ourselves in these situations?
I think maybe as humans we find it easy to blame ourselves rather than lay the blame elsewhere. Because if you know your own sort of faults or you suspect your own faults, it's probably easy to blame yourself. And in terms of being pregnant, I think Serena, she felt like she'd let everyone down by having the miscarriage when it was nothing of the sort. Like no woman should ever feel like they've let anybody down if they've gone through a miscarriage, because it's a very natural and normal thing to happen. It's sometimes it's an unfortunate thing to happen, but it does happen. You can't lay the blame anywhere, whether that's medical or anything like that. You can find out afterwards.
How did you support her in that? Because she's obviously feeling like this, but
I
how did you?
I just reassured her. I said to her, like, look, it's not your fault. I said, at the end of the day, this is, and I'm a firm believer, this was God's will. This was all His plan. And unfortunately, it was just wasn't our time. So I went on I went on the premise that I believe that the soul wasn't ready to grace the earth, which is why the soul's returned back to God in order to be maybe perfected or nurtured a bit more. So when we are ready, the soul can come back, and obviously we'll have our child. I had that firm belief, and I still believe that to this day, because I put all my faith and all my trust in God, and whatever He lays out for me is because it's meant to happen. And for Serena, it was a bit harder to understand that at the beginning. But I think as time went on, I think she sort of found solace in that okay, maybe it just wasn't our time, but our time will come. And obviously, we've had to go through these experiences, and maybe there'll be like they say, like a light at the end of the tunnel, or like there's a brighter side to the darker past that you're leaving behind.
With the fact that obviously we know, having talked to Serena about the journey she's gone through, and you're now in the process of IVF,
Mm-hmm.
what does that entail for men? And well, let's start off with, how do you feel with the fact that you're having to go through the IVF process?
On a personal level, I feel fine with it. Like for me, I'm just so excuse me. For me, it's quite easy because I thought to myself, if we can't have this naturally, we need to be realistic in terms of our options and or how we can go going forward. So if the natural process isn't working, let's look at IVF. Let's see what that entails. What do we need to do? But we've also looked at other things like surrogacy, um, foster to adopt, things like that. So we've literally put all our cards on the table because of the experiences we've been through. Um,
Can I take you back? And this is completely my fault.
mhm,
Sorry, I'm going to take this back and discuss what the doctor said, because obviously you've had complications on both sides,
mhm,
with yourselves in regards to your sperm, and then Serena in regards to how she takes to the pregnancy.
mhm.
What is it? Firstly, can you explain that a bit better so that we understand that, and then we'll go into the IVF. That was completely my fault. I jumped the gun there. What is it that is going on in regards to yourselves on both sides?
In terms of the complications we both have.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start with me. So when I suspected that my sperm wasn't as strong as it should have been, obviously we went to a private clinic where the first thing they did would have been the semen analysis before they did anything else. So when I provided my sample, um, which I felt like there's some, when they said there's something inside you that tells you it's not quite right. I
Mm.
already knew that there's something not right with my sample. Like I just had that feeling. The doctor come back to me and said that your count was pretty much close to zero, which they said is not an uncommon thing. It actually does happen more often than we think. It can be sort of rectified, and can be with certain treatments can be boosted.
What causes that to happen in the first place?
There's no specific reason. If I look from maybe a South Asian perspective, it could be the lack of vitamin D that we get in this country. So they say vitamin D supplements are are really good to take when you're trying to boost your semen, which I had to take for the last few months. I was taking it prior, but not as much as I do now. Um, and I think the nature of my job as well. So obviously, I sit down all day. I'm driving a car, and there's different factors. So in my particular case, they said that because I drive a car all day, they say the engine can affect it as well. So like all the fumes and sort of stuff like that. Also, these little devices, mobile phones, if you're keeping them in your pocket, the radioactive waves can also affect the testes area, so that can
So
reduce.
you don't think of all these things because me and Bao are pulling faces every time you say something because we're like, what? Okay.
No, see, the thing is, if that's the conversations you're having with doctors, I have heard these things, especially about mobile phones. You always hear things like that, and it
Mhm.
affecting sperm count. But did the doctors actually say that is one of the factors? Because they always try to just glaze over that. I would have thought, oh no, it might not be the mobile. I don't know.
Well,
But
I explained it to him. So, like I said, obviously, because I drive around all day, my phone's always in my pocket, or I had a pouch when I was working, so I used to put it in my pouch. My pouch was always located around my stomach area, which is close
Mhm.
enough to sort of where the testes area is. They said that can be a quite a big factor because of the radio waves going off. Because obviously, if you're getting phone calls and things like that, obviously it multiplies and it has an effect on that area. And that it's not a definite, but it can be a cause.
Okay.
So yeah, it's quite interesting to hear all the different reasons. The driving one, I was quite surprised at because you wouldn't have thought of a car to
How
sort of.
does an engine? Yeah, how does an engine affect it?
They couldn't tell me themselves, but they said that obviously because you're in a stationary position all day, it's lacking your movement in your sort of lower half anyway. But they're saying that the fumes of the car can sort of affect it. But like there was something specific about the engine and its revving that can affect. Because I drive 10, 11 hours a day. As you can imagine, I'm very stationary. I'm not doing much active work at all in terms of physically.
Mm.
So they said that can be a beneficial factor in.
Could it be, for example, when you have a certain drug, they have to list everything that could go wrong to the minus twitch?
It
Could
could,
they be just putting those out there saying, oh, it could be this, it could be that, it could be this? So have you changed your lifestyle because of what they've said? As in, changed your job? I don't know, have breaks when you're driving?
Mhm.
Has there been changes from what they've told you?
No, I haven't changed my job. I still do the same job as I do now. If not, I do more hours to be honest. But um, they gave me this tablet, so it's a female hormone drug called clomiphene, which is meant to be. The trials aren't 100% at the minute, but they say it does boost sperm levels quite high in
Mm.
quantity, not necessarily quality, but quantity. And in my case, that's actually happened. So, like the most recent sperm analysis I did, I've gone from having, I think it was about 11 in the first one to something like 600,000 now,
Oh
and
wow!
that's
So it's
over.
doing a good job. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to take that clomiphene tablets over a 3 month period, half a tablet a day.
So
Just
that's quite a big jump then. So okay, before we go into that jump, how did you feel when they said the sperm count is 11? You've just said. What was going through your mind?
I had a feeling it was low, but I didn't expect them to say that low. To the point where I'm literally producing nothing, and for me, it answered a lot of questions because then I was like, so my suspicions were right. Um, and immediately I started thinking about what can I do to rectify that and what can I do to change it now. So initial disappointment, but I sort of expected it as well.
Do you think it helped almost, when you put a label to something, then you can start working at how to solve the problem almost? Do you think it helped finding that out? Because now you've taken the tablets and now it has increased the sperm count.
Yeah, definitely. I think from a personal perspective, it helps a lot because it gives you sort of a clearer indication as to what might be going wrong or what isn't going wrong or what has gone wrong or whatever. But I think from a couple's perspective as well, because we both knew there was issues with both of us, it sort of made the whole process a lot more easier. So there was nobody to blame, sort of thing. It was more of a case of
That is quite nice, actually. Putting it like that, isn't it? Because if it's one or the other, then it's just like, oh, okay, then all the pressure's on me. That's really interesting. You've said that.
yeah. I mean, that's the sort of approach we had. So it was like there's something wrong with both of us. So it's like the best of a bad situation, if you like to call it that, because you sort of know that it's there's both of you are the issue, but you know that they can be fixed as well. Um,
How did your family react? Because I know you've been quite open in telling them everything, which is fantastic in itself. How
mhm.
did they react?
Just as supportive as they've been all the way throughout. In terms of my dad, he actually come up with so they say having like almonds and badam and nuts like that. So he actually made up. He'd done a lot of research online where he made this. It's like this nut mixture. So I used to eat that every day alongside the tablets as well.
Do you think it was the badam that sorted it out rather than the tablets?
You know what? I to be honest, I think it might have been. It could be a mix of the two, to be honest, because
Yeah,
going from 11 to 700,000, that's a massive jump. Considering I had nothing 2.5 months ago to
Yeah.
produce at almost normal levels.
how
Um,
much? What does the level? I know obviously Serena's got the complications as well. What does the level have to be for it to, rather than going through the IVF process, doing it naturally?
so they say a normal sperm count. So obviously when they ejaculate, it's meant to be in the millions. Uh,
Oh, okay.
yeah, so it's really high number. So when I was told it was 11, it was like, oh god, there's something a bit more complicated than I thought. When
Damn apple.
yeah, it's just crazy. So like when she said it was 700,000 this time, I thought it's close to normal level. It's on the lower side of the normal level,
Yeah.
but it's enough to sort of get samples out of it. So if anything, it shows that the clomiphene and the nut mixture does work. but but yeah, no, it's been a long journey, I'd say. Just because you have all these unanswered questions, and then when you start to find out things like obviously the sperm's low, that Serena's follicles are low, um, like you said earlier, it gives you sort of almost like a mini roadmap in terms of this is what's wrong, this is what we can do to fix it, and this will be what we have to do next in terms of the IVF journey to progress further with that. So.
Can I just ask, because earlier on, because my questions were obviously jumbled up there, um, you obviously looked at different options. Why is
Mhm.
it you decided on the IVF route rather than perhaps fostering or adoption or anything like that?
So the IVF route, obviously, I know quite a few family members that have gone through that route and been successful with it. It made sense to just at least give it a go, because I didn't want to sort of jump ship and say let's go and adopt, but then have that doubt in the back of my mind to say, well, maybe if we just tried IVF once, we could have maybe had our own child, or through as natural as possible without actually doing the natural sort of process. So IVF was always the next card on the table, just because I'd known family members had been through it. It was quite successful. So I thought if we give it a go and it doesn't work, that's fine as long as we've given it a go. Um, that's why we went down the IVF route. But again, like I said, we've got our cards firmly on the table. So if for any unfortunate circumstance that the IVF doesn't work this time around, then we know what steps to take next.
Where are you in the IVF journey now?
Yeah, so obviously my samples come back fine. So at the minute, my sperm that they took from that analysis has been frozen, ready to plant in Serena's egg when she's ready. So at the minute, we're having a slight complication in the sense that there's something about Serena's ovaries being a bit too big for the follicles. So the follicles are coming up quite small at the minute, and she's having to have injections into her stomach, which she's had to stop now because of the health complications. So there was something to do with and this is the bizarre thing. So like they say, each month when a woman has a period cycle, it depends on which ovary the eggs release. So like this one happened to be on the ovary, which is a slightly different shape to the other side, and it's caused a sort of complication that way. So it's hard to get the follicle from there. It would mean that could end up damaging the ovary. So rather than take the risk, they've said just wait another month, and then if it is that things might improve on that side of the ovary, or if it's the other ovary that's producing the follicles and the eggs, then we can proceed with that. So at the moment, it's just a waiting game. Um,
Can can you do anything to? medication or whatever to actually encourage one ovary to release the ovary rather than the other?
I haven't been told that as of yet. I wouldn't be surprised if there is something that can be done. But again, I think there's an operation that could be involved in moving the ovaries, but it's a very risky operation as well. So I think if it does come to that, we may not pursue the operation just because it could cause more complications further down the line.
How are
So
you? How does it feel when they say no, you're going to have to wait another month?
um, well, to be honest, my immediate reaction was we've waited this long. Another month isn't going to sort of. We've been patient enough, so if it, again and
You
again,
sound like a very patient person.
I was
So
going to
every
say,
challenge,
yeah.
you're like, okay, it's meant to be, and it's such a good way to live life. To be honest, it's.
I bet Serena's not like that. She's like, damn it, this month.
she's the opposite.
Is that right? There we
She's
are.
like,
Well,
yeah,
it's good to have the balance, isn't it?
yeah, yeah.
Otherwise, I think you'd be too laid back if you both were like that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So, like I said, if it wasn't meant to be this month, hopefully it's next month. Again, I always link it back to it's part of God's plan. There's a bigger plan in motion here, and maybe the soul just needs another month to be ready. But I'm just trying to keep it as positive as possible, and now me and Serena are in a good place in terms of everything we've been through up until this point, for us to have that understanding now. So it's nice.
That's a beautiful way of putting it. Until the soul's ready.
If you, because obviously with Himmat Collective, you are there to raise awareness about fertility issues, and you have been approached by many couples who are going through similar or fertility issues. What advice would you give someone that is listening to this podcast? What would you say to the man about going through this process?
I'd say to other males, please do speak up. Just voice how you feel, because if you contain all that sort of anxiety, if you contain all these different range of emotions, sometimes your partner just wants to know that you understand too, and I think that's quite key. And I think if you have that communication with your partner, it's vital in terms of anything you go through, whether that's a successful pregnancy or unsuccessful IVF journey, whatever it is, the communication is key there. So, and we found this especially with the first and the second miscarriages. The first one restricted us quite a lot in terms of what we could do, and we couldn't be there for each other, which sent us down a bit of a rocky path. The second time, because we had the communication, we were there together, we just laid everything out on the table. It made the process a lot more easier. So from a male perspective, I think males should just talk about how they feel, understand that it's okay not to be okay, and also if it is anything in terms of further complications such as your semen analysis, do not be afraid to get that tested, because at the end of the day, if it helps you achieve your ultimate dream and your ultimate goal of having a child, to do the analysis only takes five minutes. If sometimes you got to sort of put your pride to the side and just do what's best for you and your partner. So just be open and honest, and don't feel embarrassed, because it's not an embarrassing thing.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Vic, for giving us an insight to something that isn't spoken about very often. And to be fair, the fact that me and Taj are females, we are always a bit biased towards women, holding up the flag. But it's a really interesting thing to hear the other side, and just the fact that Serena and you, I was going to say it earlier, the language that you use at certain points was exactly the same. So that communication is obviously there, which is key through this whole process. So thank you for your time today, and we really do appreciate it.
And thank you for having me as well. And keep up the good work, guys.
Thanks very much. That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.